So, welcome to our very sobering podcast on the Charlie Kirk assassination and what it actually means for the world. So, what I want to do now, we've got a bit of a interesting approach we're going to be doing to this tonight because basically we've got the younger generation here that's really affected and sees it one way, and we've got the older generation who sees it again differently. So, I've asked my son James, who's basically to come on and do and host the podcast. And you'll see why. I'm going to get James to share a bit of his background and then I'll make a few comments on him. So, James, I'm going to open it up now for you to come and join us.
Is my mic audio okay?
Yep, it's good.
Oh, yeah. So, nice to meet you. Yeah, I'll start by saying that I was invited by Warren, who's my dad. I can give a bit of background. I'm studying my undergrad in psychology, majoring in behavioral science. So you can say that I have a bit of an interest in what drives human behavior, what drives the economy, politics, and all of that. I'm a soon-to-be honors student, and I was invited because to get a different opinion between the older generation and just to share my opinion, because I think the way that I see things would be a little bit different to say you, Warren, and to some of the older ones, because the Charlie Kirk death, just like I think everyone else here, but I was surprised how much it actually shocked me and how much it hurt, because I had been following him quite a lot, like a month or so prior to his shooting, and he was actually, I don't share a lot of his opinions. I found that some of the things he said was really good and some of the things I quite strongly disagree with. But that said, I was really surprised how shocked and upsetting and angry I was about his death. So I think this will be interesting to talk about, to share my side, actually see everyone else's opinion. And I'll hand that back over to you.
Yeah, well, thanks, James. And of course, just to give a bit more background, I'm going to got James to facilitate some questions. James, in fact, having grown up with his three other brothers, his twin brother Edward, William, and Josiah, all of them we've aimed to teach them unprogrammed. And James was involved at age 16. He's been learning business and this kind of stuff since young, and basically was one of the main ones involved in launching the Global Wealth Club at basically around age 15, 16. So you can say he's got a fair bit of experience with life. And although he's 21 years of age, he has a lot of experience. And he's come out with some stuff that's got me thinking and made me realize about the divide between the older and the younger generation. But I think it's the biggest reason why society has got some challenges ahead. So, James, let's start and ask, and you can basically facilitate some questions.
Yep, sure. Yeah, we have a lot of questions ahead just talking about this. So I'll start off just by saying, why do you actually think that this affected a lot of people? I know it affected me quite a bit. I think I'm starting to get more level-headed about it and starting to just be a bit more sober. But to start with, it was pretty shocking, pretty upsetting and disappointing. So we can start with that. Why do you actually think that people actually feel disappointed or shocked and affected by it?
It's a really good question, isn't it? We've had so many talks over coffee about this, and for me, it's always critical thinking is one of the most important skills that one needs to have. And in psychology, you learn this, and I learned this in law. And it's I actually quoted you, James, and what you said to me at breakfast a few days ago, where you said when we're both really grieving, where you said I can kind of understand why someone would shoot at Trump or Kamala Harris or Biden, even though I don't obviously endorse or condone it, because they've got the ability to destroy people's lives. They've got the ability to basically, drop bombs or whatever. But Charlie Kirk's just a peaceful, non-violent guy who has strong views, but who gave a very fair platform for anyone to speak, who got killed because people didn't like what he said. And it's very much reminded me of what would have happened with Martin Luther King. And I said this to someone, that now we think of him in one light, but at the time, imagine you got some guy yelling out loudly and basically saying you really shouldn't be discriminating against black people, burning their houses down and segregating them, which now we look back and go, yeah, but at the time he was speaking against the cultural norms. So I think for me, why I think it's affected people, be curious what you think so much, is I think we can relate to it, because whereas with Trump and political leaders, it's one thing, but it's just like a normal guy who's a normal activist just gets shot because people don't like his opinion. And it's kind of like me, or like shooting a guy who I remember years ago having a debate with because he's a radical communist and believed everything should be taken off people, but by and large, just a peaceful uni student with views, or someone shooting a CNN host because they don't like what he's saying. And once you start to get that, you've really basically it means for all intents and purposes, free speech is over. In a way, it's kind of because what people are saying is we don't want freedom of speech. We want dictatorship. We want to be governed. It's like anyway, it's very relatable to all of us, and it kind of shows how bad we've got. I mean, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I agree with that. I think that it really shows the attack, I'd say, on freedom because, yeah, people would say a lot of people after his death, I think that many people would say that it's because of his hate speech or his like negative influence on people, and I think that the way people view that is just because, yeah, like one side is a certain propaganda to the other side. And I think that someone like Charlie Kirk, who pretty much stood for freedom in all areas, I'd say. So as far as it would go, I think on one end of the spectrum you have freedom, and on the other side you have safety and stability. And I'd say that Charlie Kirk was like all the way on the freedom side, pretty much. He valued the founding culture of America, and I think just because like what you said about cultural and social norms today, for at least the way that I see it, I think that he was going against a lot of what of the social culture is today, like hookup culture, like the transgender movement, LGBTQI plus, and all that. So the way I see it is that that all the social norms of today that the left is actually really pushing people and the youth to really think that he really didn't like it, and there's a lot of that side that I understand. I think that's what a lot of people got. Either people loved him for it or people hated him for it. But regardless of opinion, I think that's why he actually people are quite shocked by his death because he just pretty much had opinions, and then he had opinions and he had thoughts on it, and he got shot for it pretty much.
Yeah, it kind of horrifies me. I mean, someone says here it's barbaric. I'm like, I just was literally shocked. Like, but someone could just go and shoot someone. But what shocked me even deeper, James, was like the number of people who've come out gloating about it and like, well, he deserved it. And I mean, I sat there just with my mouth dropping, like people who are like, we don't believe in the death penalty, for example, like some leftist who says, we do not believe in the death penalty. We think all life is sacred. And you're like, yes, this guy's gone. He got karma for him. And I mean, I had someone put a comment on my thing. Well, it was karma for him because he wanted to hunt animals. And I just didn't have time for that. I just said, you're a lowlife. You're not my friend anymore. Like I can't even fathom it. Can you?
Yeah, I can't really, but I guess I can talk on the side of the youth, and if people see, especially young people saying it, I can, even though I don't like it and disagree with people celebrating it, because just yeah, crazy that people would actually do that. But one thing I think that's really, I guess, problematic or potentially problematic is the media, like especially social media, and then we'll talk a bit more about this later because yeah, we have that in our notes for later, but pretty much people can take things on TikTok and Instagram and all of these social media platforms, and they'll put the 10-second snippet of his videos and of what he's saying, and people will say something like that. He talks like that about gun laws and about abortion or empathy or something like that, and then they'll put a 10-second snippet where it sounds really bad, and then but then they do ignore the wider context of the entire thing. So I can say that I've been like talking with my mates or they don't celebrate it like these idiots do in the media, but they didn't like Charlie Kirk or they thought he was an idiot. All these the same people literally don't understand politics or wider context, and they look at something from social media that was 10 seconds, and then they'll say that he doesn't believe in empathy. So I think that's quite problematic with social media playing a part and with people saying that they celebrate it because he was an evil man. He showed violence when he none of his actions did. His thoughts can be interpreted one way, but that's how I see it, especially for younger generations, why people would be so yeah violently celebrating and doing unspeakable things.
Yeah, well, that was for me. I mean, I hear of different politicians being killed, different things like that. And although it's never great. Again, like a good example was Kamala Harris. There's a lot of evidence that she, changed DNA testing at the border, which resulted in kids not being able going off with people claiming to be their parents and put into sex trafficking rings. And although again, I'm not in any way endorsing to shoot it, you could understand why someone would get angry enough with her to do that, or angry enough with Trump to do it. But it really hit me like, my gosh, because it was a bit of a weird thing for me. His video started popping up in my feed. When I first watched him, I thought, gosh, this guy's a bit of an extremist. Not sure about him. And the more I watched him, I grew to really respect him and like him. I thought, I like this guy. He's just a very peaceful, down-to-earth guy, a family man. You can see very much involved with his children, and very impressive in the way he would even say when a transgender was speaking and people start to heckle her, he'd go, no, no. He goes, let her speak. Her voice needs to be heard. And I remember thinking he's a better man than I do, because I don't tolerate, as you know very well at all, I'm a bit of a shut people off and a bit of a troll, whereas I was really impressed with this guy's moderateness and the way he would let people have their voice.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'd agree with that. There was some debates. I think he kind of matched the energy of people. I think if someone was open-minded, he'd be more patient and kind. If someone was, yeah, just heavily attacking, he'd just match it. But yeah, I agree with that. And then, so yeah, I guess I'll lead into our next question, which is what you actually think this means for Western society, whether you think will be like really problematic with the potential collapse or anything, or if it's not too big of a deal. What do you see with it?
It's always a hard one, but I think it really shows how morally we've collapsed and spiritually. That's what it kind of shows me, that we really, really have in a pretty bad state. When this kind of stuff and people can gloat, because like in the Roman Empire 2,000 years ago, Christ was basically crucified, and what we've got to think about is what that meant would happen. So basically, because some guy was a religious leader and people didn't like his views, he basically gets taken. He gets nails put in his hands. I mean, imagine that. Imagine how much that would hurt. He gets them put in his feet. He gets made to carry a cross, and he's whipped 39 times with a cat of nine tails. So a cat of nine tails is where you've got like a whip with actual spikes in it. So imagine that, literally. And that was normal. That would happen to people, like normal in that time. And then after that, they were actually had the gladiator at the Colosseum. And you remember you and I went to the Colosseum in Rome. And it was a weird, eerie feeling, a place where people who are politically against the system were taken in there, thrown in there for blood sport with wild animals, and be literally eaten, and the people were cheering them on. And I sat there and I thought, have we actually even changed? Are we just simply gone all the way backwards? Because for me, we've lived in an era of unprecedented good fortune in a way. Like we've lived in a society where free speech has been allowed. Like you could have different opinions. Like my father and I, who had radically different views, we literally were able to agree with each other. And by and large, in all our imperfections, we've had that. And gradually it's been eroding in recent years, like slowly been eroding bit by bit over recent years. And now we're hitting, it's kind of, in a way, it's an official sign off for me, but free speech is dead. Democracy as we know it is gone. It's, so I think, yeah, look, I think we are in a sense collapsing, because I think that the inevitable thrust from this is people calling for blood. We can see like the left was cancel culturing. Now the right's cancel culturing everywhere, cancelling people who do things. And it's just virtually turning back into blood sport until I think eventually, it's like every man or woman for himself rather than working for a better good. That's kind of where this could potentially go. And again, we can always change outcomes, but by and large, it's kind of convinced me that Australia's heading down a very dark path, and financially, and yeah, like economically, and now, because once the country's morals collapse, as the Roman Empire showed, that's always the really big reason it eventually collapses, because it collapses morally from within. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. I think that sense of morality is, yeah, it's definitely threatened now. I think that from the younger generation, I guess, perspective, I think that something like this, when you look at it in terms from your lens, I think you can understand why you would suggest that a collapse might come. But then, yeah, I think what you'll find is that a lot of young people the average young person at least, will actually kind of want that, because a lot of things are out of reach for young people, like houses and like certain,
Yeah.
like if you want to travel a lot, you have to work hard, pretty much is what you're taught. So I think a lot of things out of reach, and that's why, and as well as say self-interest is quite high for young people, and so he is like yeah, getting stability and all that. So I think that they prioritize things like that over morality and what's actually right. So something like the shooting of Charlie Kirk, I noticed that a lot of my friends or people at my peer group, a lot of them say stuff like they either turn a blind eye, so they say, oh, this is just politics, it happens all the time anyway, it's not that big of a deal. Or they say, yeah, it's probably a good thing because he was influencing people too much, or he was like getting into their minds. So I think that in terms, if you're talking about morality and a potential collapse, I think it's the type of direction, if it does head there, I think that it might be hard for people who are maybe 40 or older, and then for people around my age, I think a lot of you'll find a lot of people will actually want it. Like
Yeah,
even like socialism, I think
yeah.
we've been talking about it a little bit, but I think you'll find that a lot of young people will actually quite cry out for like uni debt will be really high. The cost to buy your own home than the Australian dream, the way it's presented. I think that that's so far out of reach that people will be really crying out for like alternative solutions.
Yeah, it's interesting because this is what we've been talking about a lot, and and it's so important because I think half the problem is a massive divide between the older and younger generation, like really big. And what's happening is that the older generation still, to a large degree, will say, "Well, come on, get off your ass and go and get a job and go and do this." But 30 or 40 years ago, you could be on a shitty income in a shitty job and you could buy a house. I mean, I can remember when I was young, I literally was able to buy two houses on a shitty income in a low paying job, as with Grace basically also on a shitty income in a low paying job. Whereas now you could be on a really good income and you would probably have great difficulty buying a house. That's just one thing. And one of my family members, who of course, he said to me, look, at the end of the day, he goes, I make a really good income. I make 700 a week while I'm at uni. He said, there's no way I can move out and get a rented house. There's no way I can buy a house. He said, as far as I'm concerned, I'm fed up with boomers and basically older people telling me about that and I should do things differently. He said, I just hope that the government I want negative gearing in taken away. I want taxes and I want their wealth. I want to share in it. And I sat there and looked at him and thought, you know what? I can understand what you're saying. And I think that if it doesn't happen before the next election, I think the government that promises a universal basic income and socialism is going to get in. And I think the reality is, I agree with you. I think younger people are crying for it. And I think as capitalists, we failed to solve the problems. We failed to do enough in terms of philanthropy and in terms of basically hearing the voice long enough. And we're at where we're at right now. That's kind of the reality. And we've got to, as a society, 100% of the time, this happens. When you get to the point where cost of living are no longer sustainable, in the Bible, they used to reset the economy. And of course, right now, we'll say we don't want the economy reset because we want to keep our wealth and our status quo. But at the end of the day, it's going to happen. That's kind of that's what I'm starting to see. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I guess building on top of that from the divide between older and younger generations, I agree. I think it's psychologically, I think it's human nature to kind of deflect responsibility and try to pick the easiest targets or pick the first thing you can blame. And because the motives and the type of things people want are so far different in like younger, yeah, like you said, I think older generations, they'll be looking at 20-year-olds just sitting on like scrolling on TikTok and cafes or literally doing nothing with their life pretty much other than just being lazy and trying. But then all they see is that that they want, well, they just want to tax the rich. On the opposite end of the spectrum, I think you have younger people who are looking at older people and they're like, oh, they're not doing much. They've made all of this income. Everything's been handed to them. It's so easy for them. They don't understand what our pain is like. So I think that you have the two clashes and conflicts that are brewing between them. And instead of trying to actually understand the other perspective, then the youth are crying out just for socialism and the older generation are crying out for that, yeah, crying out for free speech and freedom and for less tax and all that. So there's a massive divide and distance between and then I think that makes the political landscape so kind of challenging to navigate for. So that's why governments, I think, will especially will need to do something radical, and that's definitely going to piss someone off a lot. It's just a matter of who it's going to be.
Yes, someone would be happy. Well, we're just being gate crashed. It looks like Shakeel has turned up. Shakeel, for those of you who know, he's a good friend of mine, and he basically actually was involved in Turning Point, and he's met Charlie Kirk, and is involved in Turning Point Australia with Joel Jamal, who works closely with that over there. So I said to Shaq, turn up and just say a quick hi. So what do you think of all that, Shaq? You know, give your perspective having met Charlie and what you think.
Yeah, I just to clarify, I briefly spoke to him on election night last year. So, and the last comment that I made to him was that he'd broken my heart by calling Virginia for the Democrats for Kamala Harris, because I had predicted that Virginia would actually flip red, and it didn't. But yeah, look, I got a text message, early hours of the morning, and sort of read it and said Charlie Kirk is dead, and I thought somebody was just fooling around. And then the first link that I got after that was the uncensored, unedited, very brutal, bloody video. And yeah, I mean, Joel's a good friend of mine. Stephen Penneth and I have been on his show a couple of times, and you know, as you guys have been saying with freedom of speech, surely we can disagree, and surely we can actually explore each other's ideas, right? That's how you learn. That's how you grow as a person. What was Charlie Kirk doing wrong? He was going around to universities or college campuses and talking to young people and getting young people interested and involved in politics. The fact of the matter is that the left has become extremely violent, and they try to bully and harass anybody who doesn't adhere to their viewpoint. What
Well, man, I can,
the left don't realise is that at some point they're going to be on the right of the more radical parts of their party, and then they're going to be turned on. So it's a very dangerous situation, and it's not a situation that we should take lightly. Thankfully, we don't live in as violent a country here in Australia as the United States is, but it's only a matter of time.
Oh, look, I think it could be very bad. I think that when you see this going on, people endorsing it, I mean, you're not that far off from civil unrest and civil war. I mean, it's on a tender knife, really, and that's kind of how I see it. You know.
So Abby Chatfield, a few weeks ago, made comments which were essentially, in my view, encouraging people to assassinate the president. Now, if we said something like that on the right, can you imagine the uproar? And even have a look at what you've seen in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's death. You're not seeing riots in the street. You're not seeing his supporters go and burn down buildings and go and break into the Versace Gucci store like they did after George Floyd's death. They're having prayers, they're having vigils, having remembrances, because that's what they do, right? Very, very big difference on both sides. And I don't agree with everything that my Christian conservative friends hold as positions, but I don't have to, right? The fact of the matter is that you feel safe and secure and able to express your viewpoints and explore them with people that are on the centre right and further to the right. You just simply can't do that on the left.
No, exactly. In fact, James, you had you got another question there too, haven't you?
No, I agree, because I think what Shaq was actually what Shaq building on that, I think it kind of raises the question, kind of like who actually defines what hate speech is. Like we talk about this concept of freedom of speech, but who actually defines what's allowed and what's not? And I think something like this, clearly there's a lot of grey areas who actually lets us say what we want to say, and what can't we say. Because yeah, like I guess there's a lot of things that Charlie Kirk said that were taken out of context. And yeah, I was wondering if you actually know anything that he said, Shaq, that's kind of been portrayed as like really like over the line or anything like that.
So a couple of the things that the left love to jump on. One was that Charlie Kirk said that you shouldn't have empathy. Now that is taken so far out of context, and they like to not actually include everything that he said. What he actually said was that by just showing empathy, you don't, or I'm paraphrasing, you don't spend the time to look at something from somebody else's perspective and have compassion. All right. So he was actually suggesting that people should have more compassion than less, but that's not the way it's been depicted in the media. One of the other things that he talked about was that some gun deaths are inevitable, and it's a price you pay for the Second Amendment, which is the right to bear arms in the United States. So the left goes, well, see, why is he, he got exactly what he wanted. He's just a gun death, and that's a price you pay. Obviously, he's not advocating to be shot. Obviously, he's not celebrating the shooting off kids. But Warren, as we said the other day, one of the things that he talked about was you've got armed guards at banks. Excuse me, sorry. You've got armed guards at banks. You've got armed guards in all sorts of different places. But what happens at schools? They won't put armed guards there. Now, what's the alternative? You just simply take everyone's guns off. Well, that's really hard to do in a country like the United States. And the criminals aren't going to hand their guns in. So what do? So the idea that, oh, well, we're going to protect human life by taking guns away, he made the point that following that logic, you should ban motor vehicles because far more people die in motor vehicle crashes in the United States than die of gun deaths. So those were the sorts of topics that he was exploring, but the left likes to twist and turn that into something that it just simply isn't.
Yeah, you made that point, James.
Yeah, I agree. I'll elaborate on that empathy one because I found that one has been blasting all over social media, and a lot of people, it's like even some of my friends have said they doesn't believe in empathy, and I like what you were saying about that example. Yeah, he was talking about sympathy as well, like he was comparing the two, and I think I think the way he articulated it was so easy to misinterpret, just especially given a 10-second context. I think it actually makes sense. Like, if you're talking about trying to put yourself in someone's shoes, like for me, the way I see it is if someone has been brutally beaten up, it's not like I can just look at them and then feel the exact pain, the shame, and the sense of hopelessness that they experience. But if I use sympathy and compassion, then that can drive more understanding for it. And possibly, I think he may have been talking about how politicians as well, it was either that one or a separate one, how they use certain words to try to like use it to their advantage and play with people's emotions as well. So do you have any thoughts on that, Shaq?
Look, I think it's a very manipulative game, politics, and especially in the United States where the media likes to hype things up to such a big degree. And one of the issues that you end up with is with young people is this just sort of gets hammered into them all through their school. They go to university. If they've got the wrong opinion and they express that, they could lose grades, all that sort of stuff. And so, again, pointing that out, all of a sudden that makes him some sort of racist, or that makes him some sort of bigot or transphobe or homophobe or any of the other names that they put out there. So when I get to the United States, and also when I'm back in one of my home countries, the UK, because for those of you that don't know, I'm British as well as Australian, I get called a white supremacist. I'm like, huh? Right? So I'm either a race traitor or I'm a white supremacist. Now, why? Because I don't think that it's reasonable for white people in Australia or the UK or the United States to be systematically disadvantaged because of the colour of their skin, right? I have some idea what that feels like, and I don't want to see anyone else go through it. Now, Charlie Kirk essentially says things along the same lines, and all of a sudden he's a racist. How does that work? So, look, the issues in the United States are a bit different to the issues here, but Roe v. Wade is another one that was overturned with the Dobbs decision, which is the abortion law. Now, even the left judges that passed the abortion law in the United States actually said that law wasn't a very good one, the way they had basically legislated from the Supreme Court. When they overturned it, they didn't bar it. What they did was they handed it back to the states, which is in line with the Constitution of the United States. And those people that advocate for banning abortion or the morals of abortion, they're entitled to their opinion. Now, you have a look at what's happened. You see high-profile Democrat politicians that go in and basically threaten the judges. Nothing happens to them. Can you imagine if it's the other way around? And when someone Jackson Brown was asked, "What is a woman?" She couldn't answer that question, and all of a sudden, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's what you're just saying. It's something I had today talking to Shaq with somebody who is a good friend of mine, and she's quite moderate. And to her credit, she listened to me because at first she said, "But look," she said, "we can't just have people like Charlie Kirk going around and saying the kind of things that he's saying." And I said to her, "The thing is, what you got to realize is that's exactly what free speech is. Free speech means that people can say things that you don't agree with." I said, "If you don't," I said, "on your rationale, Martin Luther King should have shut his blooming mouth and let all the atrocities happen to coloured people, because at the end of the day, he was disrupting people and upsetting them." And she said, "That's actually a good point." I said, "It's correct," because I said, based on your matter, I said, Martin Luther King got shot because people couldn't handle the fact he was giving opinions that they didn't like and being an activist. And so I said, free speech means that you let people say things you may not agree with. Like, I've got a friend on Facebook who puts the most ridiculous posts, like ridiculous posts. And I disagree with this guy so strongly. But I did say to him, he wrote a post today, and I kind of put it cheekily on there. I said, "This is the first thing you posted I've ever agreed with." And I said, "Isn't that the beauty of free speech?" And he wrote back and goes, "Yeah, absolutely, hey." And it's good because this guy is as leftist as you're going to get. And we actually get on fine because I'm like, I think your post is stupid. But the other choice is you do what's happening in Russia and China. Like Russia now, I found out yesterday that you cannot call outside on Russia for WhatsApp or Telegram because Putin decided that he didn't trust the Western thing. So in Russia now, if you want to call out, you've got to use the Max app, which is completely monitored by the Russian state. And Putin told WhatsApp and Telegram, that's what we want you to do because we want to make sure that the message is uniform through Russia. Now, the other choice, if we don't have free speech, is we have everyone forced to have the same view. Is that what we actually want? I think, honestly, I'm starting to think that most Australians and Americans say they don't want that, but they actually do. They want everyone to be forced to the same opinion. It's crazy.
Look at what's happened with Nigel Farage in the UK. Now, Brexit obviously has been a somewhat controversial issue for the UK. As somebody who likes to travel, I didn't really like the fact that freedom of movement around Europe was taken away from me, but I understood their arguments. I took a lot of time to listen to what they were saying. Then Nigel Farage loses access to his account with the bank. I'm trying to think of who it is, the one that the Queen banks with. And after that, he wasn't able to open up a single bank account with any bank in the UK. So he was debanked. What the hell is that? And that's the sort of thing that I think you'll start to see happening here in Australia. You're debanked. So, yeah, okay, you got freedom of speech, but we're going to absolutely punish you and humiliate you and all the rest of it if you say the wrong thing or if you advocate for a position that other people don't agree with. Now, I've got some friends that are on the left who, you know, I respect and admire. And whilst I don't necessarily agree with their opinions, I do take the time to listen to where they're coming from. Before I came on, I was listening to you and James speak, and we're talking about homes and how difficult it is for young people to get into homes. Now, this show might be a little bit before your time, James, and there used to be a show called Healthy, Wealthy and Wise. And Paul Clitheroe, I remember when I was a kid watching the show, Paul Clitheroe had made a comment that when you go to buy a house, you should buy a house that is between 3 and 5 times your annual income. Today, you need 3 to 5 times your annual income as a deposit on a house. So it's becoming substantially harder for young people. But I believe that that's caused by poor government policy, not because of the so-called hoarding of wealth by the boomers. So, yeah, things were different for the boomers. But, you know, the idea that young people are struggling, and I just want to make the point about 2008. So Joel Jamal was actually originally a Bernie bro. And one of the things that pretty much people on the left, the right, all different religious groups, in the financial meltdown in 2007 and 8, movements like Occupy Wall Street and etc., all those people were on the same side. And now all of a sudden those very same people are divided. And meanwhile, the banks are getting away with whatever they want to get away with. The big corporations are getting away with whatever they want to get away with. And people are fighting with each other over stuff which is nonsense. So I think that shows how manipulative and how manipulated we actually are.
And I agree. I agree with all of that. So I guess if we put all of that together, the free speech being cracked down on, the government policies, the problems that youth are facing, what do both of you actually think this may lead to in Australia? I know we touched on it briefly earlier, but I guess going into more detail, what do you think that we could actually see tangibly?
I'll just start and then let get Shaq. All I'll say on that is I agree with what Shaq said. I think Australia's track record shows we're very clever at gaslighting, which means, for example, in COVID, what we did was we didn't like say you got to get vaccinated. We said, oh no, you don't have to get vaccinated, but you can't go to the pub, you can't go this, you can't go visit Aunt Mary, you can't go to the brothel, you can't go to you can buy alcohol, that's fine, but you can't go and go to church. And you can't do this. But if you get vaccinated, we will reward you as a good person. And so Australia's good at that. Like, we don't necessarily ban things, but we go, oh, we think that naughty things have been done with investment scams, so they pass financial services law, so they're so stupid that no one can really say anything, and we're all regulated. So that's Australia's way of dealing with things. So I tend to agree with what Shaq's saying. I think that we will become a complete dictatorship, but without being a dictatorship. On the surface, it'll seem like we're not. But if you speak against what's going on, and especially if they get this horrific barbaric law through in December, where they effectively turn us into a Chinese-based country where all our internet is completely censored in the guise of, as Senator Ralph Babet says, digital protection for under 16s. And as an aside, I'm sure you both agree with me, why the fuck, excuse the French, are people giving the state authority to raise their kids, like saying, oh no, we need you to protect our kids? It's like, be a fucking parent and monitor your kids' internet if you've got a problem. And yet we're saying, no, we need this to protect our kids. And then effectively, by default, the adults are going to come in. The adults then have to get digital ID to use social media. And then next minute, basically governments can censor it and says, this is where I think it will go. I mean, if I got cameras that can look into your car and take a photo of you on your mobile, and I got one of those, and literally I could have been reading a book, or I could have been doing other things which are X-rated, I won't say, and they would have got me fair and square on the camera. Now, what's to say that they won't say, oh no, if we see you got a Nazi symbol, or you got a we hate Israel or we hate Palestine thing in your car, you're going to get a please explain. And then on social media, oh, you posted they've actually passed laws now that says you can't post certain violent videos. And so it's just a bit of a crime. So someone posts one, you make a comment on something where you, in a moment of anger, next minute you've got to please explain. I think this is where this is going to go, and I hope I'm wrong. I think we're in deep shit in that sense, and I think it's going to become completely, I think, but that's, so we may not basically get, governments come in and shoot us all, but effectively, if you've got no livelihood and no freedom, life isn't all that fun. That's potentially where this could go. And yeah, my biggest thing, I cannot stay strong enough on this thing. Like, I cannot believe that we're even thinking of letting governments pass this law, as Elon Musk said, around the social media in December. It's like, be a fucking parent. Stop your kid getting on the internet if you're under 16, if you don't want them to, What do you think, Shaq?
So it's actually pretty well. I'm going to respond to a couple of things, but it's actually a bit worse than that. Because you ever look at the UK, you can be prosecuted for saying something offensive or somebody else. Now, here's what they're like. Okay, so I'm obviously not a fan of the Labor Party either here in Australia or in the UK. I've never voted for them. I'm not going to say that I never would. I just never have. So I on Edge Radio, I think it was Edge Radio, called Keir Starmer an effing something. And I think he's doing an abysmal job of running the UK. Next thing I know, my LinkedIn page has the courts in the UK have looked me up. And I'm like, okay, so what? Am I going to get in trouble next time I go to the UK? Right? Now, this misinformation and disinformation bill that they were looking at passing, what's in there is if you say something negative, for example, about the banks, okay, even if what you said was true, or even if what you said was just an opinion, like if you said, hey, I think the Australian banking sector is not as secure as it used to be, because that has the potential to disturb the economic security of Australia, they could have those sorts of posts removed, or you could be fined, or misinformation out of it. Now, how ridiculous is that? And what the government won't do themselves, they'll get other companies to do on their behalf. And if I can just briefly use an example, you were talking about alcohol. If you remember, during COVID, there were some people that had to quarantine in an apartment building in Sydney. They were told that they could only drink 6 bottles of beer a day. Now, who the hell is the government to tell people that? So I pretty much resent being told what to do and what not to do by government. I think that some rules are totally ridiculous. Like, for example, in New South Wales, you are not allowed to eat in a smoking area. Now, I can understand and respect that you can't smoke in an eating area, but if you choose to eat in a smoking area, who the hell is the government to tell you that you can't do that? Now, earlier this year, I went for a holiday to Coffs Harbour, and I had heaps of different people showed up at various times, at different times. There was 11 adults. I placed 7 separate orders on Uber Eats for alcohol delivery. I then received an email from Uber Eats saying that, in line with the DrinkWise policy, they're concerned about the amount of alcohol that I've ordered, and so they're going to be monitoring my account and placing a restriction on my account to prevent me from buying alcohol. How long is it going to be before banks start to say, look, you've been going to the pub too often, you've been going to buy too many cigarettes? And one of the reports they've got out at the moment is a suggestion that they'll trial with Australia, where they will have currency that has a time limit on it. So when they have the digital CBDCs, that it'll have a time limit on it. So if the government needs to boost economic activity, they can say, hey, look, the $5,000 you've got in your bank account, if you don't spend it by such and such a date, it'll have no value. That's the sort of power that government wants. And I think it's a big FU to the rest of us, because it doesn't matter whether we consent or not. They're just going to do whatever the hell they
So do you think that power distance between society and the governments are just getting wider and wider?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Look, I've had all sorts of banking issues myself personally this year. And I was actually discussing this with Warren the other day. So one of my banks picked up the fact that I was a dual citizen, and they asked me for my HMRC number, which is the tax file number for the UK. Now, the Australian government, as far as I'm aware, has no right to know whether I'm a citizen of another country. But the banks all of a sudden say, in order for me to comply, I need to give them an HMRC number, which I don't have because I've never lived in the UK. So that bank then notified every other bank that I had transferred money to that was in my name, and I had all of my accounts locked. I'm actually still dealing with some of that now. And that's the government's way of saying, if you want to try and be slippery, or you want to try and do this or that, you will comply with what we want you to do somewhere else. And, I think it's a terrible, terrible is that I think there are so many people that would love to say something about it, but won't, because they're afraid that something would happen to them. And that's really what Kirk's murder is about. In my opinion, it's about scaring you. Just like Donald Trump. How does, a 20-year-old kid get and shoot a former president? No, people were actually pointing at the roof. And have we heard very much about it since then? Not really.
Yeah, and I guess that can kind of lead on to a question that we got from Christine. And I guess we can start with you, Warren, because I think that this might be up your alley if we're looking at history. So Christine was saying about the breakdown of society morally, which was what we were talking about earlier, similar to what happened with Rome. And she listed 3 stages here. So I wonder, do you think of this with the first stage being isolation, stage 2, chaos, and stage 3, civil war? Because this, I think, with Charlie Kirk, going back to that topic, I think that a lot of people are wondering why this has been so heavily pushed in the media. So I wonder if that could possibly be these 3 stages that Christine is talking about. What do you think?
I always think you've always got to get this balance between, I think one extreme is where you're living in the mainstream media, where your whole life is governed by them. And if the mainstream media say, go and take a carrot up your bum to cure you from an illness, which I'm sure many would have done during COVID, you'll do it. And then you've got the other extreme that says, everything's a conspiracy. And I've got friends that literally right now are convinced that Charlie Kirk faked his death and kind of disappeared off into the sunset. I mean, I've seen some crazy stuff, you know. I always like to just go by common sense and logical. Like for me, I never had any doubt September 11 there was something weird about it. I never had much doubt that there was something weird about, you know, the Vegas shooting, things like that. Charlie Kirk, as I said to someone, just critical thinking tells you, number one, there's no question in my mind that he didn't had any idea his death was coming. Number one. Number two, did that young guy who supposedly did it do it? I'm like, give me a break. I mean, you can't tell me that that 22-year-old guy did that. Personally, I'm inclined to agree with Christine. I think that you've got like the sovereign individual, to where basically book written in 995 talks about the collapse of Rome and how it happened and all the stages. And right now we've been following the blueprint to the letter. And one of the stages was that the governments would become virtually crime gangs that would just take people's money without and become totalitarian, which is happening. Then the next step that happened was that once people start pulling out all their money from you, the next thing that starts happening was that they start stopping money getting around. I don't have any doubt at some stage in Australia they're going to start stopping or making it hard to get money out of the country if as more people start pulling money out, which is why I'm telling clients to start doing it. So in answer to Christine's question, I don't have any doubt that there were forces behind that who want to create this, put this in the media and get civil war and get chaos happening. Because once you get chaos, then people will be screaming and crying out for order. And guess what? They'll be coming in to bring an order, global world order, new world order, whatever order you want to call it. I mean, but yeah, 100%. I think isolation, chaos meant civil war. So civil war, and then stage 4 is a cry for order and a solution. And guess what? You can rest assured they've got the solution ready to give you. I mean, what do you think, James?
Yeah, I can definitely see that point. And yeah, especially what Christine said about civil war was interesting because I've
Yeah.
noticed that with this situation that a lot of people are the left and right wings, or yeah, there's so much division now between them. Like a lot of obviously social media being a really big avenue to communicate now. You can see a lot of people are unfriending each other because of their views. People are getting mad at each other in person if they share different views or just have opposing views. I think that it kind of reminds me of the Hunger Games, or yeah, if you're looking historical, if you're looking at Civil War, the way they actually unfold. I think that people are getting so angry at each other, the left are getting so mad at the right, and vice versa. That people, I like a quote in the Hunger Games. I think it was the second one where they said that they people forget the real enemy or whatever. And so I'm curious about your thoughts because people are so focused on each other, which probably could lead to civil war, to chaos. And people forget that governments are slowly passing these bills. I'm sure that the people on this webinar are probably more aware of the things being passed than the average person. But what do you think of that? Just that there's so much division between people that they're forgetting what's actually unfolding behind the scenes.
Yeah, what do you think, Shaq?
Well, you know, Charlie Kirk used to get criticised quite a lot by people who were on the right of him, but he wasn't right enough. I always considered Charlie Kirk to be a reasonably moderate kind of person. The so-called division between left and right, if you have a look at where most people are fairly close to centre. They might be centre left on some issues, centre right on the other. So one of the things that you hear a lot these days is conversations where people say, look, we've got limited resources and how come we don't have healthcare funded and education funded? We've got a rise in homelessness in our countries, etc. And yet we're bringing in people from other countries and spending all this money on them. Surely we should be able to do something already here. That's not normally something that you're used to hearing from the so-called right. So when you hear people say things like that, I turn around and say, well, what do you mean by somebody being right-wing? What are we talking about? And what do we mean when we say that somebody's left-wing? Really what we're talking about is the extremes. And for some reason, what we sort of refer to as the woke left, the extremely woke people on the left, they're the ones that seem to be sucking out all the air. So you get people like Abby Chatfield that carry on, like she's, main character syndrome. And that seems to be the representation of the left. Well, most people on the left don't act like her and don't think like her. Most people who are on the right are not neo-Nazi nut jobs. I mean, this is the thing with the Australia rally that happened a few weeks ago. It was hijacked by some of these neo-Nazis. In no way is their opinion reflective of those people who are concerned about rising immigration, rising house prices, etc., etc. That's not the main. The division that's actually happening, I think, is drummed up by the media, and it's because people genuinely don't realise what's actually being said by the other side. I mean, just one classic example of this, and I hear this from Americans all the time. They've got one of the most progressive tax rates or tax systems in the world. Now, between state and federal taxes, they get about 25% of the GDP of the country. And everybody's unhappy with the tax system in the US, from the very poor to the middle class to the very wealthy. Australia used to have an extremely progressive tax system, and everyone in Australia is unhappy with the tax system. Now, New Zealand, by comparison, flat rate 30% income tax, 15% GST. US gets 25% of their GDP. We were getting about 27 and 28%. New Zealand's getting 33%. So when you say that to people in the United States and say, look, when you sit there and say soak the rich and, you know, screw the rich, blah, blah, we're going to tax them at 90% of their income. The very wealthy don't earn money like that. How much money does Elon Musk actually earn? Bugger all, because he borrows money against his assets. So you can tax him at 200% of his income. It's not going to work. But you say that to people on the left, like, oh, well, you know, you just try to defend the rich. And it's ridiculous, because nobody will take the time to actually listen to what's being said and listen to the opposing views, right? Now, I've actually gone out of my way to listen to people on the left when they talk about not having the revenue to make sure that everyone's life is comfortable. I think that they make a fair point. I really do. But then, and again, Warren, I was sort of touched on this the other day. Why do you have ramping in hospitals in Western Australia? You know, one of the things that, you know, I find so offensive is, for example, Princess Margaret Children's Hospital met about 10 or 15 years ago. We're trying to raise money to buy this new equipment. So they were running a charity and they were going to get this equipment that was worth a couple of $1 million. I find that so offensive, because haven't we as a society already agreed that those things should be funded? And aren't we already paying our taxes? So after paying our taxes, you then want us to donate our post-tax income for you to buy equipment that we've already paid for. Those children's charities should be about, you know, entertaining the kids and giving them teddy bears and trying to make sure the kids are better, not for vital infrastructure that we've already paid for. So those sorts of things, I think they matter. I think that, yes, taxes need to be paid, but we should be keeping an eye on what government does with our money.
Yeah, absolutely. James, you got some more questions, haven't you?
I've got a couple more. So I guess there's a lot of problems listed. So I guess before we start looking into practical steps that can be taken to, I guess, address it, then do you guys see any final problems or any issues, whether that's related to the Charlie Kirk situation or just existing government issues that we might be missing?
Well, I think it's very interesting that he had those 7,000 students in the auditorium, and him and Laura Ingraham from Fox News jumped up on stage, and much of the conversation was about Jeffrey Epstein. And then all of a sudden, Charlie Kirk just backed off the Epstein thing. So I'm not going to say that that's directly connected to what's ended up happening to him, but it certainly is very interesting. The way that Dan Bongino and Kash Patel looked in that interview with Fox when they said, oh, he definitely killed himself. But we don't have any video footage of it, by the way. You know, there's something that's seriously amiss there. Why is there no records of his prime brokerage account? You know, investigative reports have come out and nobody seems to be able to access any history of his trades. So how did he make his money? Who was he? What was he doing? Also, if you trade the sort of size that Jeffrey Epstein was reported to trade, you leave a footprint. So how come nobody knows about it? The other thing that I think is notable is that it seems like any kind of criticism or concern of Israel is reacted to very, very strongly. Now, I'm not taking a side on that because, quite honestly, I just don't know. I don't know what's right and wrong in that conflict. I don't know who's right and wrong. You listen to all these different people. some people say that, Israel has every right to defend itself and it's really Hamas and they've got all these hostages, etc. And then other people say, well, they're starving children and they're committing human rights violations, etc. How are we supposed to know from this country what's going on the other side of the world? I don't like the fact that there's not very much media coverage. And, there is some suggestion that, they are committing, that Israel's committing human rights abuses. I'm certainly not a fan of Donald Trump going into Iran the way he has, or Israel dropping a bomb on Qatar, like completely unprovoked. I think that is a massive escalation of tensions in the Middle East. But it seems like those people who were previously on the side of Israel, who then come out and express any kind of concern or ask any kind of question, all of a sudden get attacked. And I think that's a very, very interesting situation. And I think it's worth looking at. And what exactly are our obligations as a country to another country?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, it fascinates me that whole thing, and with the whole, and look, more than anything else, where I'm at, just a bit of a comment for myself, is that I mean, I've enjoyed living in Australia. Do I think this is Australia when I'm living in now as the one I once lived in? No, I do not. Do I feel completely safe like I used to? Not at the level I used to feel. For me right now, practically, there's no question that it's like when you live in a country of free speech and things like that, it's great. You can get out, you can enjoy it. I enjoy hanging out with people like that. If I'm going to be in a place where my views are going to be quashed, and let's say even me doing a podcast could become problematic for me, I'll just get to the point where, you see, if I go and visit, say, Dubai, I know there's strict rules. I'm not going to get up and say something, or in Thailand, like F the king or something, because I know that's going to get me in all kinds of trouble. So Australia is kind of going on the same path. And so a question for me, that's just my general comment, are we going to basically be in a dictatorship or whatever? Or, basically, I think the major thing we've all got to decide, as I see it, is just how I react to it. And one way is just to accept what's going on and keep our homeland, keep our culture, and just accept the changes, or start making questions as to what we do. And I know one of the things I did say to James, and we've spoken about, was that in the last few years, they've changed the conscription laws, for example. So basically now, if you're 60 years of age, they can conscript you for war. Now, I don't have the slightest doubt the way we're going, but if some war breaks out, Australia's just going to go along with whatever they're asked. And considering I'm under 60, I might get conscripted, and I'm certainly got no intention of fighting a bankers' war myself. So I'm certainly making sure I've got some plan Bs. That's kind of the only other comment I'll add in, James, in answer to your question.
It would help us, Warren, if you and I are on the front lines together trying to bloody save this country. I
know we're gone. If you and I are on the front line, we're gone. Australia will be owned by someone.
Now, I remember in the UK years ago, but back when I was in high school, they were giving out piggy banks. Now, when I went to school in Western Australia, we got a piggy bank from the Commonwealth Bank, and we got like a blue globe thing from ANZ, right? Then all of a sudden, in the UK, they not only banned the piggy banks, but they banned it from being called piggy banks out of respect for the Muslim, immigrants that moved to the UK. Now, half of my family, most of my family are Muslim. So they come to visit Sydney just recently over Christmas, and they wanted to see the Christmas lights. None, because Clover Moore has got rid of it all out of respect for the Muslims. So my Muslim family were like, well, where do we go to see them? I said, you got to go to the Muslim areas in Western Sydney. That's where you go see the nativity scenes. That's where you go see the Christmas lights, because Muslims believe in Jesus Christ and the Virgin Mary, etc. So you've got to go there to see them. But I think that one of the most offensive and something that just makes me so, so angry is the Australia Day stuff. So for those people that don't know, the 26th of January is also Indian Independence Day. So what do you think they're celebrating in Sydney City? Indian Independence Day. But if you fly an Australian flag, you could be arrested for inciting violence. I mean, like, how is that anything other than a declaration of war? They celebrate Chinese New Year's and won't let us celebrate Australia Day. I mean, why should we accept these changes? But we are.
I know. Well, James, I know you've got to finish it now. And of course, I'll just make a very quick comment just to say that as soon as a country loses its culture, whether it's Hindu, Christian, Dubai's got its own culture. Singapore's got its culture, and we're just eroded, so we have no culture, no identity anymore. I don't want to waffle too much on that because, James, I know you've got to end this. So what's your last question for us, James?
Well, yeah, I mean, I can start off just because with the last question that was in the Q&A box, whether if there's any ways to get around the digital ID coming in December.
Well, that's a good question. I think that we've kind of left it pretty late, haven't we, really? I mean, unless we really push back, I think it's going to come in, but some major pushing back. And the real question is, I think, looking for alternate social medias. I think that what's happening in Russia right now, as I mentioned, where you can't go on WhatsApp and Telegram and phones, very realistically likely, we're going to have to be looking at alternate ways to do alternate social media. I think that's a very real thing. I don't see any obvious way around it on the surface. I mean, have you got any comments, Jack? Because I'll admit I'm perplexed on that one. I don't have any easy answer at the moment, other than to say that just having to kind of learn to play the game, be careful, and look at alternate options and alternate messaging services.
So, look, I'm no technologist, but wouldn't a VPN get you around that? And if Australia then blocks VPNs, how are you going to block a private VPN that's been set up where you're accessing a remote computer that's in a different jurisdiction? I mean, I don't see it being something that's very easy or that's really workable. And I think the most young people will be able to get around it like that. I mean, you can't stop young people from looking at porn on the internet. They've never have been able to. So, young people know technology better than anybody else. They'll know how to get around these rules. It proves nothing other than the government trying to force something that Australians resoundingly said no to, which was the digital ID. Same thing with the voice. The voice gets voted down across the country, including Victoria. And now what do? They go to make moves to introduce the voice to Parliament at a state level in every state and territory.
Yep, the biggest FU. So, well, yes, this podcast today was a bit of a more just to get some discussion, just do something a bit different. Most of our webinars are very educational, really just designed to have a bit of a chat and things like that. And no doubt we'll be doing more over the coming weeks. And thanks for turning up, Shaq.
Yeah, no, thank you. If I could just say one last thing in relation to Charlie Kirk. So there's been a 50% increase in membership and followers to Turning Point UK. There's been a doubling of the followers to Turning Point Australia. So if the left thinks that this is the way to win the fight, it's not. All you've done is you've incentivized people to come across. And the more the people actually look at what Charlie Kirk said and the positions he actually took, the more they realise that he was a very moderate kind of person. And he's exactly the kind of person that you want involved in politics, talking to young people. Now, I include people who are on the left, like the guys from Friendly Geordies, for example, and many other people who are on the left. They are perfectly entitled to talk to young people, to go to universities and to try to persuade people to their viewpoint. I think that's perfectly reasonable. So the fact of the matter is that Charlie Kirk's legacy will live on. And most importantly, what's really obvious is that the overwhelming majority of people do not support that we're seeing from people on the left.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a positive note, James.
I think his wife said something like nice as well. Does along those lines that it's going to awaken a lot of different Charlie Kirks, even though he's been killed. I think she was saying that it'll awaken a lot of people across the world who stand for free speech and for movement. So I'll be curious to see how this song plays because it was definitely a really big event, I think.
Oh, his wife made I love what his wife said. She said the cries of his widow will echo as a battle cry. And I remember thinking, what a great way and a mature way to face it, because clearly she's distraught, as you would be. She's got 2 young kids now who she's trying to explain what's happened. And that's what really upset me. I mean, I've shed many a tear over this. And I like the way she just said, I want to let his legacy live on, because in other words, the only way she can return that grief is to make a difference. And I do think that his legacy will live on. And I do think it's woken up more people. I will say that's the one big positive out of it. And people coming here today, 40 odd people, and there's going to be a lot of people who'll be listening to the recording. If all of you think differently and wake up a little bit more, I mean, who knows? We can maybe start to push back a little bit.
It's about time. You know,
Time.
People should read the Magna Carta. People should read the sort of rights they fought for the UK. Then they should read and understand what the Constitution, especially the first 10 rights in the Bill of Rights, actually stood for. Those values have been fought for many, many generations before us to give us the freedoms that are now being stolen from us, and we should fight to keep them.
Love it. Thanks for coming, Shaq, and thanks, James, for podcasting. Thanks for leading us, and I hope you all enjoyed having the range, you know, right from the older generation to the mid-generation to the younger generation.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me as well.
Thanks.